All right, so if you haven't figured it out by now, I am not going through the video sequence the same pace that, or the same sequence that Alan Becker does in Principles of Animation series that I'm sharing here. Now, we've done timing, so that's why we brought in the timing sheet. We wanted to figure out where the ball is going to bounce at any given point. Now, if you've got a ball that is of a different weight, it's going to act differently. We're going to touch on that soon. But right now, we've got the timing sheet. We brought in this timing sheet. We're just straight copying it. Okay. Now we're going to copy the next thing. We've just talked about arcs and how things naturally tend to move in arcs, which we can do a straight up and down. But if we were to try to get this to move across the page, we would want it in an arc. We wouldn't want it to just bounce in straight diagonals because that's not very realistic. Okay, the arcs are much more realistic. So, first up, as you can see, I finished out the sequence. Okay, so I filled in keyframes for the rest of them. Now, we're going to use those exact keyframes. Okay, now the keyframes that have the black dots in there, those indicate that it's a keyframe and that it has something on it. You'll note this frame under here, or this layer under it, it's got the one keyframe, and that's the one keyframe that this image is on, but it doesn't need any other keyframes because that image just runs straight through. It doesn't move. You only use keyframes when you want to indicate that something's moved. If the ball were going to stop and levitate in the air for a second, then I would add 24 keyframes of it frozen up in the air. Or not 24 keyframes, I'm sorry. I'd add 24 frames. Okay, so I would just add this large gray space, counting out to 24. Okay, and then it would float for that full second and then drop again. Okay, but we're not doing that. We're following the arc. We're following our timing sequence. Now, another quick thing to note here. You'll notice this sheet that I got. I talked about on stage versus off stage. On stage is within this box. When before I put this up, it was a white box that was up here, and I went and made this image. Even though it's white, I made it larger than the stage so that the 1 would start up here and the 31 would start out here, or would end out here towards the edge of the page. I didn't want it to start part way and then just be this tiny little bounce going on. I wanted to use as much of the stage as I could. Well, like I said, things that are on stage and things that are off stage behave differently. If I control enter to test this again, you'll notice that sequence, the words down there, aren't on stage. Okay, so that where I got this from, the Angry Animator, it's not showing on stage because my timing sequence, it just didn't fit there. If they would have put it higher on the page, it would be sitting on there. But so that you understand, anything that appears outside that white line is not meant to be seen. Okay. All right. So let's go into creating our arc. Now the bounce that we got is very handy. It's covering the bounces. It's covering the arcs that we want. So that part's all covered for us. We just need to put things in place. Now, it may not line up perfect. The main thing to think about is that it's following this arc. Okay, so the center of the ball at every given point, I want to make sure that I line up the center. If I can't line it up exactly with the number, I need to make sure that I line it up with the center of the arc. Okay, that is where the crucial part is. All right, so coming back to this. Sorry, I had a dog going nuts in here. Um, all right, so I'm starting at 1. So I go to frame 1 and I move it to where it needed to be. Then I'm going to go ahead and click on frame 2. Okay, you'll notice where frame 1 was didn't affect where frame 2 is. So then all I need to drag that over. And again, I would just want to make sure the center of the ball here is lined up with the arc. Okay, that is one of the crucial things in this. Otherwise, if it's not, then the ball starts to wobble as it falls, and that's not very natural. Now, I'm about to tell you another shortcut key too. I line up with the 3 here. Okay, so here's the shortcut key. On your keyboard, the period and the comma keys. What that allows you to do, if I press period multiple times, I'm moving forward through the timeline. If I press comma, I'm moving backwards through the timeline. Okay, so I'm on frame 3 here. I press the period to move forward one, and I'm on frame 4, and I can take and drag it. Okay, so it saves me from having to move the mouse down every time to move it. Now you'll notice 4 is no longer lined up right with the middle. Okay, that's okay. I could go and move it down some, but I'm not as worried about that as making sure that it's following the arc. Okay, so frame 5. All right, and I'm going to quickly knock out the rest of these because this is a pretty easy process. It's just lining up and making sure that your arc is lined up. Now, one thing that you're probably going to see start to happen here is the ball is not getting up as high as the top of the arc, which actually at that time it did. Okay, so probably I'm guessing around 21 I get out of sequence, or I get end up my bounce doesn't bounce as high. Okay, so here it is. 19 is I'm just seeing it's like right at the top of the ball, and 20 I can still see the 20. But again, just stay on the arc. Really, the most important part of this is the fact that when it goes up like this, that the next one, so I'm at 21, 22 should be lower than 21. As long as 22 is lower than 21, your arc will look fine. If it's moving along and it suddenly raises, that's going to look weird. Okay, so make sure you don't do that. All right, 24, 25. Now I'm also going to do one more thing at the end here. So hold on. When you get yours in, I want you to do something like this too. So yeah, my 28 is considerably lower, but 29 is lower than 28, and 30 is lower than 29, and 31 is back onto the ground. Because I set up 31, 25, 17, 7, I set all those up at ground level. Those shouldn't move up or down at all. Otherwise, it ends up with something weird. Now, if I press the F6 key again, it's going to create a duplicate of that one right at the end. Now, what I'm going to go ahead and do is move this out and up just a little bit. Okay, there we go. And I'm going to press F6 again. Okay, and move it out and down just a little bit. And F6 again. Let's move it out some more. And F6, out some more. F6, until it's off stage. Once it's off stage, not worried about it. So now when I test this, I have an arc and it continues and rolls off the page. That's what I wanted to aim for. That's why I added those extra frames so that it didn't just hit 31 and stop and start over. So it gives the illusion of a loop. Okay, so it's cycling through like it's never ending. Somebody's continuing to throw a bouncy red ball into this white space. All right, so that covers that. Next up, we're going to talk about the principle of squash and stretch.